one of the reasons that we wanted to have you on is, you got a great resume. You've coached championship teams. You've made an impact in people's lives. But you are now the coach of the Italian Olympic team in 2026. How the heck did that happen?
It's one of those situations that, just as was the case when I went to the KHL, a phone call out of the blue. And actually, they had called me to ask me to recommend some individuals who I thought would be good candidates. So I did that. The Italian Federation flew to Edmonton and interviewed a number of people. And they came back and asked if I would be interested. Now, I think there was another candidate in Mark Crawford, but Mark, I think, decided he wanted to put himself in a position which it turned out to be correct for him to go back and coach in Switzerland. So he's in Zurich now.
Right.
And as a result, they asked me, well, we've interviewed some candidates, but we're more interested in asking you, would you be interested in doing this? And I said, what does it entail? They described it, and I said, okay. I would prefer if I could bring my associate along, Mike Polino. And of course, they were happy about that because Mike's father was born in Italy, Italian background. And so it worked out well that we had coaching history, coaching together in, first of all, the NHL, and then the KHL, and now in Italy. So it's been an interesting experience so far. I signed a 4-year deal at the time, and that took us through the Olympics and the World Championships in 2026. So we have a series of tournaments every year. Last year we had 3. This year we'll have 4. The following year will be 4, and then the Olympic year. So it's and then you coach during those sessions or those tournaments, and then you scout. So it's a combination of looking for hockey players and identifying players, and then having training camps and selecting a team.
So, Mike, one of the interesting things about this journey that you're embarking on, and obviously it must have been the same in Russia, is there's language barriers with unless you're fluent in Italian, but language barriers between you and executives you'll talk to, maybe potential players. And so how does that work? Do you have a translator around you all the time? And particularly when you have to talk to any players who do not speak the languages you speak?
Well, that's an interesting perspective, but that was true when I went to Russia until I learned enough Russian to speak and give commands and direct the team. And that happened very quickly. I don't know if I have just a great ear for languages or not, but it happened very quickly that I picked up enough vocabulary to communicate with a non-English speaking group of players. And that was 99% of them on the Russian team in Magnitogorsk, the KHL. In this case, you'd be surprised. Everyone speaks English. All the executives are fluent. All the players are fluent. We don't have one player who can't speak English. So I don't know if it goes back to the educational system. I'm in an area that's very German as well as Italian. And a lot of these young guys can speak 3 languages minimum. So it's really that part of it, that transition has been very easy.
What's the level of hockey?
That's interesting. They hadn't won a gold medal since 2006. This is Team Italy. And when our first tournament was in Budapest. And in that tournament, there was 2 countries that are in the big pool, and that is France and Hungary. Mm-hmm. And they play with Canada and so on. And we beat both of those teams in that tournament. And as a result, I guess you would say that it would reflect the bottom end of the top teams in in the top International Ice Hockey Federation tournaments, including Canada. So it would reflect the bottom teams of that grouping.
But there was a time, Mike, when, and it still happens in lots of sports, and sometimes it still happens in hockey, where you do more research into ancestry than you do about what the hockey player's career is, because was his grandmother Italian? Was his grandfather Italian? What's his passport going to be like? How quickly can we get him an Italian passport? Does that still occur?
It does, but there's also a caveat that they have to play in Italy and be part of the Italian Hockey Federation for 16 months prior to the Olympics. So this season actually is the last season that we can recruit, and we call them double passport players that have ancestry of grandparents or parents that were born in Italy. And as you know, particularly in the Toronto region, it's incredible number of Italians, but all over North America that play hockey. So we can recruit those players and then be part of the competitive process in terms of selecting the team. So at this point, and maybe you'd be a little bit surprised, but there'll be some double passport players that will compete, but that won't make it compared to the Italian players. So where I live is in Bolzano, Italy. That's in the Dolomites, the Alps. And it was interesting for me when I first arrived that every small community has an ice hockey arena and an ice hockey minor program. And there's more arenas in that region than all of Europe. It's a very wealthy region. It's the wealthiest region in the country. And those children, male and female, that do one of two sports or both, they either play hockey or ski, and in the winter, and most of them do both. So it's interesting that the level and it at one time, guys, it was even more incredible because there were more at that a few years ago, the Ron Chipperfield days and so on, more import players that drove the level of hockey up. And now that they don't have the same financial resources and the advent of the KHL, those players have gone to and they go to Germany, they go to Switzerland, they go to Sweden, Finland. We recruit everywhere because some of the better Italian players can make more money than they can in Italy, but the competitive base is building as we recruit more.
Mike, you're probably one of the best guys to answer a question like this. A place like Canada obviously has a great hockey culture. Infrastructure is not really an issue. Same thing with the United States, maybe Russia as well, although obviously now post-war, who really knows? But when it comes to a place like Italy, like what's realistic in terms of the number of years? If you really wanted to get this thing, I don't even know if competitive is the right word, but get the Italians to a place, let's say, where like making the Olympics regularly was a thing. Like, is it a 25-year project? Is it a 40-year project? Or can like this be done fairly quickly?
That's a great question, and we're going to see the reality of it in 2026. But the possibility of youngsters improving and developing becomes greater. The difficulty is for them to aspire to be professionals, because a lot of the young players in their 20s and early 30s play, but eventually they have, and most of them are educated because they realize that eventually they got to go to the working world. And unless they can make a jump to the NHL, we just had a young player, first Italian player drafted in the second round by Anaheim. And he's got a great future as a professional hockey player in the NHL. He is very, very impressive. And as an athlete,
so he's on your team.
He could be. He's playing in Sweden right now. Yeah, by the time 26 comes around, see, we have these players playing in Germany, Sweden, Switzerland. A lot of the better players aren't playing in the country. However, we do have some solid players playing. There's 3 major cities now involved in the Ice League, it's called, and that includes mostly Austrian teams and some Slovakian, some Slovenian, some Hungarian, but mostly Austrian and the 3 big Italian teams. So that's where the development is in Italy itself.